Old Man Zangetsu is easily one of the most mysterious characters to feature within Bleach. There is a lot to unpack about his character, as we don't get to know everything about him all in one go. Information about Old Man Zangetsu is slowly drip-fed to us, and he's not a character that appears a whole lot within the story. So it is for this reason that I want to break down and analyze all of his appearances, in order to truly understand the role that he plays within the story. By the end of this video, you'll know the truth about Old Man Zangetsu, unveiling all of the mystery behind his character. I'm going to be breaking down his character from his first appearance during the Substitute Shinigami arc, all the way down to the shocking plot twist that occurs during the 1000-Year Blood War arc. So let's begin my breakdown and analysis of Old Man Zangetsu. Zangetsu makes his debut appearance within the story in chapter 63 of the manga and in episode 19 of the anime. Old Man Zangetsu is a spiritual manifestation that resides within Ichigo's inner world. However, this does not prevent his character from occasionally manifesting into the real world, which he can do so in a manner where he is seen by others, like during Ichigo's training with Yoriichi to activate his Bankai, albeit this is credited to Yoriichi utilizing a strange doll called a Tenshintai, which forces the spirit of Zanpakuto to materialize, or alternatively in a manner by which he is unseen by others, and I'm pretty sure that this is the default for any Zanpakuto spirit that materializes within the real world. They can only be seen by the wielder of the Zanpakuto, like when he manifests in front of Ichigo during his battle against Kinpachi, and it is evident that the captain is oblivious to the appearance of Old Man Zangetsu. Zangetsu has a tall stature and a distinctive stubble, and who can forget his long black hair which is always billowing in the breeze, covering his iconic sunglasses. This middle-aged iteration of Zangetsu is referred to by Ichigo as Old Man Zangetsu. However, there is a alternative younger version of his character that appears during the Fate Karakura Town arc, and we get to see this iteration of his character in chapter 409. This version of Zangetsu is referred to as Tensa Zangetsu, which is how Zangetsu manifests when Ichigo enters into his inner world with his Bankai, explaining why he is named after Ichigo's Bankai. Zangetsu has a very calm but yet assertive personality. His tendency to be level-headed is contrasted with Ichigo's hot-tempered nature, and it is for this reason that he often acts as a mentor or a father figure to Ichigo. He is attentive and subservient to Ichigo's desire to become stronger, and it is for this reason that he is constantly pushing him and getting him out of his comfort zone. So now that we know some basic information about his character, let's dive into his first appearance within the story. He makes his debut appearance during Ichigo's training with Urahara. While Ichigo's soul is undergoing a process called encroachment, he is dragged into his inner world. After opening his eyes, it appears that he is stood on the side of a tall skyscraper. An individual is calling out to him, asking if he can hear him. When Ichigo asks who this individual is, Old Man Zangetsu is surprised that Ichigo doesn't know who he is. He says, "It's me," and the next speech bubble is actually blacked out and cracked. And from a question that was submitted to Kubo in his official fan club, we learned that Ichibei, who is one of the members of the Zero Division, who actually guard the Soul King, had intervened in this moment and had blacked out the true identity of Old Man Zangetsu, and we later find out the true identity of this character in the 1000-Year Blood War arc, which occurs hundreds of chapters from this moment. Even in the next panel, Kubo makes sure to emphasize that Ichigo didn't hear what Old Man Zangetsu had just said. He comments on Ichigo not being able to hear what he had said, as he states that something still can't reach Ichigo, and that it is too bad. He next asks Ichigo how many times does he have to shout for him to hear his voice. He tells Ichigo that there is nobody in this world that knows Old Man Zangetsu better than Ichigo. He is very judgmental to Ichigo's actions and responses in this instance, questioning why he is shocked and startled when Old Man Zangetsu begins to manipulate the surroundings of Ichigo's inner world. He reminds Ichigo how he had been effortlessly using his Shinigami powers up until the point that they were taken away from him. He then reveals that the Shinigami powers that Byakuya had taken away from him had belonged to Rukia. However, this was his mistake, because he overlooked the fact that Ichigo has his own Shinigami powers. We then learn that Rukia's powers had awakened Ichigo's. These Shinigami powers are hidden deep within Ichigo's soul, and it is now up to Ichigo to find them. The skyscrapers surrounding them begin to crumble into boxes, as Ichigo is told that his Shinigami powers reside within one of these boxes. If he does not find the correct box before his entire world is disintegrated, then he will be transformed into a hollow. When Ichigo finds the correct box thanks to the use of the spirit ribbon, he grabs the hilt of the Zanpakuto Zanpakuto. Old Man Zangetsu expresses relief that he was able to find it, and that he hopes that next time his name will reach Ichigo. After pulling out his Zanpakuto, Ichigo leaves his inner world, thus ending his first encounter with Old Man Zangetsu. His character next appears in chapter 66 when Ichigo learns the true name of his Zanpakuto. During his training with Urahara, Ichigo is made to understand that he is fearful. He is constantly running away. He questions himself if this is all of the resolve that he has. By running away, he is behaving shamefully and like a coward. It is at this moment that Old Man Zangetsu manifests before him. He questions Ichigo why is it that he is running, and that he still hasn't called out to him. As a mentor, he tells Ichigo to face forward, and that now he should be able to hear his voice, because before the thing that was plugging Ichigo's ears was his fear. Old Man Zangetsu has a lot of iconic quotes within the story, and chapter 66 is no exception, as he tells Ichigo that there is only one enemy and one of him. What is there to fear? He tells Ichigo to abandon his fear and face forward, and to advance and not to give an inch back to his enemy. If Ichigo retreats, then he will age, and if he is afraid, then he will die. Finally, he tells him to shout out his name, as we get the revelation that this mysterious character is called Zangetsu, or so we were led to believe. Old Man Zangetsu makes his next appearance during the Soul Society arc, while Ichigo is facing off against Kinpachi. When Kinpachi walks away from him and Ichigo is laying in a pool of his own blood, pleading with himself that he doesn't want to die, and that he cannot lose yet, he needs to get up in order to save Rukia. It is at that moment that Old Man Zangetsu appears before Ichigo, as he questions whether if he wants to fight, then asking if he wants to win, or does he just want to live. When Ichigo affirms and yells out that he wants to win, he is dragged into his inner world. He begins by advising Ichigo to take a look at his surroundings, and that even after that traumatic battle with Kinpachi, his inner world still remains stable. He hands over to Ichigo a nameless Zanpakuto, or in other words, a Asuchi. Old Man Zangetsu reveals that he is wielding Ichigo's Zanpakuto. After tossing it up in the air, it is caught by Hollow Ichigo. Old Man Zangetsu tells Ichigo that he wants to see if he is worthy of wielding him once again. If he wants his Zanpakuto back, then he'll have to take it back from himself, in a battle between Kurosaki and Shirosaki. During his battle against Hollow Ichigo, he is made to realize that he has not been effectively utilizing his Zanpakuto. During this encounter, Hollow Ichigo also serves as a mentor to Ichigo. However, he has more of an impatient and aggressive approach when compared to Old Man Zangetsu. He makes Ichigo understand that there is a lot more to a Zanpakuto than just knowing its name. Zangetsu is capable of so much more, but if only Ichigo opens his heart up to him. Ichigo has been dragged into his inner world because the fact of the matter is he doesn't care about his Zanpakuto at all. Hollow Ichigo guides him into having a stronger bond with his Zanpakuto and makes him feel guilty for neglecting Zangetsu. When Ichigo affirms to himself that he wants another chance in order to get to know Zangetsu better, the tables turn as Ichigo is now holding Zangetsu while Hollow Ichigo is wielding the nameless Asuchi. Ichigo is deemed worthy enough to wield Zangetsu once more, and he leaves his inner world to continue his battle against Kinpachi. However, at the start of chapter 112, we have a very rare exchange that occurs between Hollow Ichigo and Old Man Zangetsu. It appears that the two of them had an agreement to train Ichigo in this instance, as Old Man Zangetsu apologizes to Hollow Ichigo for troubling him after requesting his assistance to train Ichigo. Ichigo's inner Hollow doesn't seem too bothered about helping him, as he states that he is the king of this world, and that himself and Old Man Zangetsu need him to win, and as long as he continues to do so, then Hollow Ichigo will help in any way that he can. But before leaving, he gives Old Man Zangetsu an ominous warning, as he advises him to train Ichigo well, because one day the power that he possesses will be his. After Hollow Ichigo leaves, we get an internal monologue from Old Man Zangetsu. Now, this is one of the most important scenes in relation to his character that occurs within the entirety of this series, as for the first time we get the mystery about his character slowly being unpeeled. In this inner monologue, he is speaking to Ichigo, as he tells him that he hates the rain, and that in Ichigo's inner world it also rains. When he is upset, the skies start to become cloudy, and when he is sad, it begins pouring down rain. When it rains in his inner world, Old Man Zangetsu cannot stand it. He asks Ichigo if he can understand what it feels like to be rained upon in a lonely world, and it is for this reason that Old Man Zangetsu will do anything in his power to hold back the rain. He will lend him whatever strength that he can. In exchange of his help, he only asks for one thing. He asks for Ichigo to place his trust in him, because Old Man Zangetsu will not let any rain fall into his inner world. He reminds Ichigo that he isn't fighting alone. I cannot stress how important this moment is for understanding the motives for Old Man Zangetsu. The information that we find out about his character later on in the series completely correlates with this instance and what he says in this internal monologue. When the truth about his character is revealed, we think back to chapter 112. When we as the reader or even Ichigo begin to lose our trust in Zangetsu, we think back to this inner inner monologue where he tells Ichigo to place his trust in him, because Old Man Zangetsu has only ever wanted to help Ichigo, and that's a fact despite all of the truth that we uncover about him later on in the story. We see Old Man Zangetsu again in chapter 127, where Yoriichi enlists his help in order to teach Ichigo how to attain Bankai. Ichigo has a time limit of 3 days to attain Bankai. In that time, he has to force his Zanpakuto spirit to submit in some way. He has to pierce through the body of Zangetsu with the correct Zanpakuto. Several Zanpakuto appear around Ichigo, as Old Man Zangetsu explains to Ichigo that only one of them is real, and he can be only defeated by that Zanpakuto. If he intends on submitting Old Man Zangetsu, then he needs to find the correct Zanpakuto before he kills him. Within the manga, we don't get to see much of this training, but in chapter 143 we catch up with Ichigo, as he is bloodied and kneeling before Old Man Zangetsu. He questions if Ichigo is going to get back up again, to which he replies of course he is, because he had made an oath to himself that he would rescue Rukia. Of course, Ichigo does attain Bankai and makes it in time to save Rukia, and we see his Bankai for the first time during his battle against Byakuya. Now, Old Man Zangetsu doesn't appear in the story again until the 1000-year Blood War arc. Even during the Arrancar arc, when Ichigo is dragged into his inner world, he encounters Hollow Ichigo, but during the fake Karakura Town arc, we do see a younger iteration of Old Man Zangetsu, who is referred to as Tensa Zangetsu. Ichigo enters his inner world and is tasked with learning the final Getsuga Tensho. We encounter this character in chapter 409. Just as Isshin had warned Ichigo, Tensa Zangetsu is reluctant to teach Ichigo the final Getsuga Tensho. When Ichigo enters into his inner world on this occasion, the first thing that you'll note is that his entire inner world is submerged underwater. Ichigo quickly identifies Tensa Zangetsu as his Zanpakuto spirit while he is in his Bankai form. He begins to attack Ichigo. He knows that Ichigo has come to his inner world to ask him about the final Getsuga Tensho. He refuses to teach him such a technique. He tells Tensa Zangetsu that he cannot protect Karakura-tan without this technique. Tensa Zangetsu then makes a very important distinction, as he tells Ichigo that the things that he wants to protect differ from what Ichigo wants to protect. When Ichigo is made to realize that his inner world looks very different to what it used to, Tensa Zangetsu reveals to him that his tall, hopeful skyscrapers have been replaced by a replica of Karakura Town, and that because of Ichigo's grief and sadness, his entire inner world has been submerged underwater. The rain would not stop pouring until it filled the entirety of his inner world. He explains that this has happened because Ichigo failed to continue walking forward. He gave into his despair. Tensa Zangetsu then pulls out the source of Ichigo's despair, as Hollow Ichigo appears before him. He explains to Ichigo that he has never seen his inner hollow in this form before, and tells him that he had transformed in this form when he had defeated Ukiura. This is the form that Ichigo fears. Ichigo is unable to properly holofy because he is afraid of this form. While in this form, his own mind had been suppressed and he had given into his destructive impulses, resulting in Ichigo even hurting Uryu. Tensa Zangetsu reveals that his inner hollow and himself are both one. They then proceed to combine as they form the holified Tensa Zangetsu. They are able to do this because they both are the source of Ichigo's power. This combined form then charges at Ichigo as their battle begins. In chapter 420, after Ichigo realizes that Tensa Zangetsu could have defeated him at any moment, he says to himself that he can feel loneliness emanating from Tensa Zangetsu's Zanpakuto. It is at that moment Ichigo realizes what he must do. He lets go of his Zanpakuto and allows Tensa Zangetsu to run his blade through his body. The only way that the final Getsuga Tensho can be achieved is by accepting Tensa Zangetsu's blade. Ichigo isn't feeling any pain because Tensa Zangetsu is a part of him. During this moment, Tensa Zangetsu cries, as he asks Ichigo to remember back to when he had said that what he wants to protect is different to what Ichigo wants to protect. This is because that which Tensa Zangetsu wants to protect was Ichigo. The reason that Tensa Zangetsu did not want to teach Ichigo the final Getsuga Tensho was that if he was to use this technique, then he would lose all of his Shinigami powers. Because he is a part of Ichigo, he knows better than anybody the pain that Ichigo feels without having the power to protect. This is why Tensa Zangetsu had started to cry after Ichigo had acquired this technique. Because he desires to protect Ichigo, he knows how much it's going to hurt him when he loses his powers. This further emphasizes what Old Man Zangetsu had stated in chapter 112, that he would do anything to prevent the rain from falling in his inner world. Zangetsu makes another absence in the story all the way up until the mid portion of the 1000-year Blood War arc. After Ichigo speaks to his father and learns about the truth of how his mother had died and how Yhwach was responsible for her death, he returns to Uetsu Nimaya's domain. The creator of the Zanpakuto reveals to Ichigo that Zangetsu is not his real Zanpakuto spirit. Instead, the hollow that resides within Ichigo was his Zanpakuto spirit all along, while Old Man Zangetsu had been pretending to be his Zanpakuto spirit this entire time. Nimaya then makes Ichigo realize that this individual who has been impersonating his Zanpakuto is actually the appearance of Yhwach from 1,000 years ago. Old Man Zangetsu was never a representation of Ichigo's Shinigami powers. Instead, he had represented Ichigo's inner Quincy power, which he had obviously inherited from his mother. In chapter 541, this younger version of Yhwach confirms to Ichigo that he is not Zangetsu. When Ichigo questions if he is Yhwach, he tells him that he is simply the source of his Quincy power. In a way, he is Yhwach and he isn't Yhwach. Ichigo is still understandably confused and shocked by this revelation, as he questions whether if he is his enemy or his ally, and was everything that he had said up until this point a lie. He explains to Ichigo that he isn't either, nor his enemy or his friend, but however, this individual had never lied to Ichigo. The only lie that he had told him was his name. If you recall back to chapter 66, he had stated that he was Zangetsu, when this was not the case. He then asks Ichigo if he has noted that whenever he had wanted to teach Ichigo about his Zanpakuto, he had enlisted the help of Hollow Ichigo, and when Ichigo wasn't able to control the power of his Zanpakuto, and when he was on the verge of losing his life wasn't saved by this younger version of Yhwach. Instead, Ichigo had been constantly saved by his inner hollow. This individual, who represents Ichigo's Quincy powers, did not want Ichigo to become a Shinigami, and it is for this reason that he had suppressed Ichigo's powers. Through this suppression, he had become the center of Ichigo's power, while Hollow Ichigo was effectively second in command, which we now know was Ichigo's true Zanpakuto spirit. The reason that young Yhwach had done this was so that Ichigo was away from danger or conflict. He had known that if Ichigo had become a Shinigami, then he would have been dragged into battle, whether if he had wanted to or not, and it is through battle that Ichigo would have experienced hurt and he would have been made to suffer. And if you recall the words of Old Man Zangetsu from chapter 112, that when Ichigo is hurt or when he suffers, it rains in his inner world. And this is something that the source of Ichigo's Quincy powers cannot stand. He had been opposed to the idea of Ichigo becoming a Shinigami to the extent that he would have killed him himself. However, after accompanying Ichigo over time, his mind had changed. He had seen that Ichigo had chosen the path of becoming a Shinigami. In response to becoming a Shinigami, Ichigo had strengthened himself. He had continued to push down this path despite going through pain and suffering. When young Yhwach had seen the pain that Ichigo had endured, but despite this continued moving forward, his resolve to hold Ichigo back had wavered. Instead of keeping Ichigo's Shinigami powers away from him, he had decided to help him instead. And it is now that after Ichigo has learnt the truth in chapter 541 that Old Man Zangetsu or young Yhwach steps away. Like a father figure, he tells Ichigo that he is proud to have seen him grow strong, and he feels blessed to have watched him grow stronger and to have been by his side. To him, there is no greater joy than this. He is content now to relinquish the hold that he has on Ichigo's powers. He fades away as a single tear falls from his eye. The final meeting between Old Man Zangetsu and Ichigo is incredibly emotional, and in some respects it is heartbreaking. Within an instance, who Ichigo had believed was the source of his power becomes the very individual who is responsible for the death of his mother. It is this feeling of betrayal that overwhelms Ichigo in this instance. It was too much for him to handle. This is why he was frantically questioning him whether if he was his friend or his enemy, or if everything he had said to him was a lie. A small detail that people often miss during this final conversation between Ichigo and Old Man Zangetsu is that it begins raining after Ichigo yells out to him. His emotions of despair are outwardly manifested in his inner world. The amount of rain that began pouring had quickly filled up his inner world, and before long the two of them are completely submerged underwater. And it was only after reading these chapters several times that I'd even picked up on this small detail, and it still fascinates me how I'm able to pick up new details that Kubo has implemented into his story even after reading through the entirety of the story several times. While they're discussing, you can see these skyscrapers crumbling, and you can see that Kubo is utilizing visual imagery to demonstrate how devastated Ichigo is, what he must be feeling and experiencing deep inside. Being a source of Ichigo's Quincy powers, Old Man Zangetsu takes the form of Yhwach, and because he is the essence of a Quincy, he opposes the idea of Ichigo becoming a Shinigami. But however, because he was born with Ichigo, his attachment to him is far more important than whatever goal or desire that Yhwach or the Quincy have, and it is for this reason that he had wanted to support and help Ichigo. Despite being a piece of Yhwach's soul, his loyalty had always remained with Ichigo, and this was the conflict that Old Man Zangetsu or young Yhwach had been dealing with, explaining why in some instances he had felt like a very shady or mysterious character, and we only learn the truth about him right at the very end of the story. He was torn between this duty of being the Quincy essence, whilst also wanting to see Ichigo grow and become stronger, and this further supports what he had stated in chapter 420, that the only thing that he wants to protect is Ichigo, and it further emphasizes what he had stated in chapter 112, when he had stated that he would do anything in his power to stop the rain from falling in Ichigo's inner world. And after all of this, he is happy to relinquish control over to Zangetsu, his true Zanpakuto spirit. He fades away as he expresses how proud he is of Ichigo. He expresses his joy at seeing him grow stronger. As a part of Ichigo, he knows exactly what he has gone through and what he has felt. Nobody knows him better than this individual who had dominated Ichigo's inner world for so long, and you understand this close bond that this Quincy essence had with Ichigo. He had cried when he bid farewell to Ichigo during his final Getsuga Tensho training, and Old Man Zangetsu cries now after relinquishing his hold on Ichigo's powers as he fades away. Through this character that I've analysed in this video, you can see how deep Kubo's writing goes, and there are still several theories and points that I haven't mentioned about him that I would love to create separate videos on, like how in chapter 127, when Ichigo is training to attain Bankai, he says to him that only one of the Zanpakuto is the true Zangetsu, and he can only be defeated by that sword. Now, if you want to take this statement as Yhwach saying this, then it rings true for the events that occur in chapter 684. Yhwach was defeated by that very Zanpakuto that Ichigo was trying to find in chapter 127. In chapter 684, the white surrounding Ichigo's Zanpakuto breaks, revealing the original form of his Zanpakuto, which he had used to cut down Yhwach with a single strike. This entire scene echoes that statement by Old Man Zangetsu in chapter 127, that I can only be defeated by that sword. It is incredible foreshadowing. What's not to love about this character? Whether if you refer to him as Old Man Zangetsu or Young Yhwach, he is still one of the coolest and most mysterious characters to feature within the entirety of Bleach. He is closely linked to the main protagonist and antagonist of this story, and his character is central to the biggest plot twist that occurs within Bleach. So now I hand over the discussion to all of you. What did you think about Old Man Zangetsu? After watching this video, do you understand his role within the story better? Were there any points about his character that I failed to mention? Or do you have your own theories surrounding his character? I would love to read about your thoughts, so definitely leave a comment under this video. I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into one of my favorite characters, and I can't wait to see you in my next Bleach character analysis video. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, then please consider supporting my channel on Patreon. I have multiple tiers with rewards including access to an exclusive Discord server, video scripts, as well as being the first to know about unreleased upcoming videos. Thank you for your time, and whatever you choose to contribute I will appreciate, and it will mean a lot to me.